Hi guys, welcome back to Nairobi Legal. In today's video, we are going to be discussing the defenses for copyright infringement in Kenya. These are the 4 key objectives we set out to achieve in this video. Number 1 being for us to refresh on the rights of a copyright owner that we discussed in the 4 previous videos on copyright law in Kenya. I want us also to appreciate that if a person has a copyright in Kenya, does it mean that they also have copyright protection in other countries? The third objective will be for us to appreciate the limitation that can be put on the exclusive rights that are enjoyed by a copyright owner. And majorly, like I started from the beginning, our focus will be on the defenses for copyright infringement, meaning that when you're playing music that belongs to another person, or you're using a book or photocopying a book belonging to another person, what defenses can you be able to use so that you're safe? Before we go into aspects of copyright infringement and what defense that you can use, we need to appreciate that according to Section 26 of the Copyright Act of Kenya 2001, we know that copyright owners have a right to reproduction of their work, translation and adaptation, and each of these terms were discussed in the previous videos we had on copyright law in Kenya. Now, having known these rights that copyright owners are entitled to, one thing we need to appreciate is that these exclusive rights under this section can be limited as provided under the second schedule of the Copyright Act of Kenya, meaning that by the end of this video, you must have understood the limitations that can be put on the rights of copyright owners. When it comes to the BERN Convention, which answers the second objective of this video, once a person has a copyright in Kenya, that copyright will be recognized in all other countries that are member states to the BERN Convention. Now, as you can already see from your screen, Kenya ratified this convention on the 11th of June 1993, and this BERN Convention has 178 signatories, meaning that once you have a copyright in Kenya, it will apply in all other member states. Your protection extends to all members of the BERN Convention. We also say that getting a copyright does not require formalities, and this discussion was elaborated in the previous videos we had on copyright law in Kenya. But currently, Kenya is encouraging people to register their copyrights, and this information is available online. This registration is available online, and you can consider actually going online to register your copyright. So the essence of this discussion is for you to appreciate that much as we don't have formalities for registration of a copyright, you can still register it for purposes of having a track record, and the government through the Kenya Copyright Board is actually encouraging registration of your copyrights currently. The first defense for copyright infringement in Kenya is fair dealing, and as a student you need to appreciate that a dealing is likely to be fair if it is done for public or charitable purposes as opposed to uses for profit or commercial purposes. So here what I'm trying to mean is that if you're using someone's copyrighted music, simply for entertainment, maybe for the public, and there's no profit motive driving your action, then in that case you can rely on the defense of fair dealing. But should you be using someone else's copyrighted work to make a profit or for commercial purposes, then in that case the defense of fair dealing may not apply, because your motive is to make profit out of this copyrighted work. Now, as a student, before you look at any question on copyright infringement and you want to apply the defense of fair dealing, one thing you need to determine is whether copyright exists in the first place. Remember, before you talk about infringement, something that you're infringing has to be in existence in the first place. So number 1, you need to determine that there is a copyright. After having a copyright, then look at the aspects of infringement and ask yourself, does fair dealing apply in this specific situation? Remember, if there is a profit motive or a commercial purpose involved, then you cannot rely on a defense of fair dealing. When it comes to using the defense of fair dealing, One thing you need to understand as a copyright law student is that we have 6 factors that can be considered in assessing whether a dealing is actually fair or not. Now, as you can already see, this is what we call the test for fair dealing. And the first one is that you look at the purpose of dealing. Now, previously we said that if someone's use of copyrighted work is for making profits, then in that case the defense of fair dealing may not apply. And just to give an example and to put this into context, if Jen takes a selfie in a bikini looking good and she posts it on a private Instagram page, then we have a manufacturing company A coming to actually uplift Jen's picture from her Instagram page, and then this picture is used to advertise for beauty products on this company's website and billboards. In this case, you can see a clear situation of copyright infringement. Remember, no one can use your photographs without authorization. There is an infringement of your copyright. Yeah, you need to give permission. For this particular example, Jen must give authorization to this company to use her selfie. As you can already tell here, the motive of using this picture is for commercial benefit, and so the company may not rely on the defense of their dealing. The next step to consider is the character of the dealing. You ask yourself, is it customary or is it usual that a beauty company is used to actually simply uplifting people's pictures from their Instagram pages and using them to advertise their beauty products on their websites and billboards? Of course, you can already know or tell that it is not usual for companies to do that. And for a company to advertise, they normally have people who advertise for them, and if they need someone to appear as an ambassador for their products, then they will have to pay that person, or they will even get an agency to get ladies to advertise for them. So it's not usual. Of course, in this particular example, again, this test fails, meaning that the company may not rely on the defense of fair dealing. The third step in assessing whether a dealing is fair is to look at the amount of dealing that is taken. And in terms of dealing, what I mean is that you look at the amount of copyrighted work that is being taken by someone else. An example would be that for the case of Jen, you look at how much of a content or photographs have been used by this beauty company to advertise its products. After that, then you look at the alternatives. Could the beauty company have used another person's photo to advertise its product? And of course, you already know that these companies have alternatives in terms of hiring out agencies to advertise their products, or even pay someone to be the ambassador in terms of advertising their beauty products. Now, the fifth step is to look at the nature of work. Is it published work or unpublished work? And when it comes to penalties, unpublished work attracts even a higher penalty than published work, because this is outright theft, meaning that you're taking someone's work, before even they derive any economic benefit out of it, and now you're taking it as your own piece of work for sale. The other thing we look at is the effect of the dealing on the work, meaning that if a person A has written a book, and remember these books are sold to make money and incentivize copyright owners, the effect of someone else picking that book and photocopying it to sell copies in the market is bad, because person A is going to lose out on profits. They will not derive economic benefit from their hard work. So remember also, this happens a lot in music. The effect of you reproducing someone's music to make money out of it means that the original person who composed or made that music is not deriving an economic benefit from the work that they invested in, which is making this music. So these are the things you look at to assess whether a dealing is fair or not. When it comes to the defense of fair dealing in copyright infringement matters, remember, we've discussed the factors to be considered in assessing whether a dealing is fair or not. And so, if you're answering a question on this aspect of fair dealing, the first thing you need to do is to describe the 6 factors, and then you do a balancing test, meaning that you've described each of the 6 factors, then you begin to do a balancing test. What I mean by a balancing test here is that you need to show which of the 6 factors fall in favor of the original copyright owner. And taking you back to the example of Jane, you're able to tell that, look, Jane's pictures were taken off her Instagram page without her permission, and these pictures were used to advertise beauty products on billboards and social media pages, meaning that the intention of using Jane's pictures was to make an economic benefit as a result of increased sales from the beauty products sold. So you can see I'm justifying one of the 6 factors that we've discussed previously. The other thing you need to acknowledge is that any of these 6 factors can be determined to be more important, but you need to justify by giving reasons why. And so the takeout point here is that you may give a particular factor more weight, but remember, you need to justify why. And as we proceed into our further discussions on fair dealing as a defense for copyright infringement, one thing we need to acknowledge is that the defense of fair dealing must be done according to the law. And if you watch this video until the end, you will be able to understand to what extent can I actually infringe on someone's copyright, and I'm going to rely on the defense of fair dealing, and it will be according to the law. Having understood the factors that are considered in assessing whether a dealing is fair or not, I want us also to appreciate that much as copyright owners have exclusive rights over their copyrighted work, there are certain circumstances according to the 2nd schedule of the Copyright Act of Kenya where you can actually use someone's copyrighted work and you're going to have a defense of fair dealing. An example would be that if you're using someone's copyrighted work, an example could be music for private use. All of us play music in our homes and we are not infringing any copyright. And the other thing is that also you could read an interesting book, and in that case you have a right to quote a paragraph from that book. It's interesting. The other thing you need to appreciate is that people do parodies of people's music. Yeah, it could be a video someone is doing a parody on, and also if someone cites or someone talks about a quote from a book, or even someone broadcasting a copyrighted work in public, and they go ahead to acknowledge the author, in that case that person cannot claim that there is a copyright infringement of their work. In all these circumstances, we have a defense of fair dealing coming into play. So remember the defense of fair dealing and the circumstances under which it will apply. Also, one thing you need to understand is that before using someone's copyrighted work, you need to acknowledge it. If you're writing an article or book and you're simply uplifting paragraphs from someone else's work, it's prudent that you go ahead to acknowledge such authors. The other example as far as fair dealing is concerned, we know that in universities a lecturer could scan a book that is so rare to find. Maybe he does a scan of 4 pages and he shares with the students. In that case, there is no copyright infringement because these scans are done for purposes of education, and you can already tell there is no economic benefit that is being derived by the lecturer in the process of sharing those scanned copies. Now, the next defense for copyright infringement is a defense of exhaustion, and what we mean here is that, have you ever wondered when you go into a bookshop to buy a book, you become the owner of that book? It's no longer belonging to the person who authored it. Yeah, you actually own the book, meaning that you own it legitimately because you've bought it from an authorized shop. Yeah, so these are keywords. Number one, you've gotten that book from an authorized bookshop, so you own it legitimately, meaning that after reading it, you can choose to later on sell it and get money out of it. And when you get that money, you don't need to go up and pay royalties to the original person who had written that book. Yeah, so that is what we call the first sale doctrine. You own the book, but remember that much as you own that book, you have no right to go ahead and reproduce that book, meaning that you have no right to make copies of that book, meaning that if you bought one book, you can't make 5 other copies and start selling them. In that case, you're now infringing on the copyright of the original copyright owner of that book. Yeah, and so you need to understand what the first sale doctrine means. The other thing you need to appreciate is that according to section 23 of the Copyright Act of Kenya, copyrights last for 50 years after you die, meaning that after 50 years your copyright will revert to the state. The state will become the owner of your copyright. The other thing you might be wondering is that what happens in case a copyright is jointly owned. We know this in Kenya. We have groups of musicians that sing together. An example could be South Soul. We have Ethic Entertainment. These are people who own a song as a group. In this case, when it comes to when does a copyright revert back to the state, reference will be made according to the author who dies last. Meaning that if you're a group of 4 musicians, whoever dies last, that's when we'll start counting the 50 years. And after those 50 years, copyrights will now return to the state. The state will own those copyrights in that music. In our next video, we're going to be discussing about parodies and cases in Kenya where the defense of fair dealing has been used. For active engagement, please follow our Twitter page. And should you have any specific questions for me, please drop me an email. I will be happy to respond to you. Not to forget, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing to receive notifications each and every time I post a new video. Thank you.